We should be live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to What Recruiters Look For in Our Tech-Driven World, webinar by Uncubed. I'm here with Scott Bacon, a recruiter currently at Cruise Automation. Scott Bacon's also worked at companies like Google and Uber. He has a lot of experience in the field. So, Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Scott. First of all, before I jump into me, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to a global audience about recruiting and all things, segueing out of college to this type of career, right? So, so a little bit about me. I am a graduate of Columbia University. I had a bit of a non-traditional start to my education in that I was a musician for 5 years before I went back to school. But I eventually graduated from Columbia, and then I got my start at Google as a specific kind of recruiter called a technical sourcer. Happy to get into what that means later. And I spent a year at Google. After that, I worked at a small startup called Hired. I was one of the first employees there to build out both the recruiting function there as well as their product. After that, I went to Uber, where I managed a team of recruiters and also recruited internationally and domestically, both in the US and in Amsterdam. After that, I had a very brief stint as the head of recruiting at an incredibly small startup, like 10 people, something like that. And then I segued to Cruise Automation as a senior recruiter.
That's really awesome. And let me just introduce myself as well. I'm Kalisa. I'm an intern currently at Uncubed. I'm also currently a freshman at Columbia University. So I'm majoring in chemical engineering, but we'll figure that out along the way. So I guess we can get into this. We're just gonna have a few questions back and forth. And I think firstly, what we kind of want to start off with is understanding your journey with recruiting and how that was.
Sure. So there's two things to understand. Well, one thing in particular to understand about recruiting is most people fall into it in some manner. It's not something that you major in, right? It's a funnel, or how would I put this? It's a place where a lot of liberal arts majors end up because they are unsure what to do with their liberal arts degree. So I was a cultural anthropology major. I absolutely love the study of culture and people and the intersection of different types of people groups and cultures. But when I graduated, I was thinking about this prior to graduation, of course, but even up until that point, I was thinking, well, I suppose I could write, I can talk well. I have no idea how those skills actually translate to a job that has trajectory and it pays well, et cetera, et cetera. So I found my way into recruiting through my sister, spoiler alert, who is a recruiter. And she said, hey, you are a lot like me. You should consider a career in recruiting because you are personable. You have the ability to talk to people and convince them of doing something in a non-nefarious way. That sounds a little creepy, but in a way that that shows them what they could possibly look forward to in a different career, right? So, in addition to that, I through my education at Columbia, I learned how to write concisely and make great points, and which are both very much keys to success in recruiting. But the short answer is that I fell into it, and I feel particularly lucky that I did.
Nice. That's really awesome. So now on the other side of it, how was the job search for you and actually getting into it? Like, I'm just trying to understand how you viewed the whole recruitment thing and how you felt university staff were helping you through that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I am a little bit of an unusual case because I am what they would consider in the university world a non-traditional student, in that I got my start a bit late. And I wanted to somehow purpose my prior experience in music as some type of industry experience elsewhere. And I think that speaking with career services at my university, it was a little bit challenging because I know that, I mean, I didn't have the most applicable skill sets, but I do know that other non-traditional students had very applicable skill sets elsewhere but weren't able to open the doors that they were looking for, because the career services centers are mostly geared toward university students of a traditional age, right? They're looking for their first job or internships, which makes sense. So for me, it was a little challenging because I was interviewing at a bunch of places where they were anticipating a 21 or 22-year-old person, and then in walks this bald man, right? So that was a bit of a challenge, but I will say that in terms of things like resume development, right, and how to structure my information to sell it to like a number of different positions, career services was particularly helpful in that regard. And just putting me in contact with people that, even though they weren't able to help me at the time, were able to connect me with other people that looked upon my experience and my path, I guess you could say, with greater, with a broader mindset, I guess, right? So yeah, let's see. Is there anything else I want to say? With regards to actually interviewing, there was also a tremendous amount of help from the Career Services Center as well, just being able to answer some of the questions that I could anticipate, right? But again, I think that there's this this unusual, like unusual contextualization of my prior experience that made it difficult for me to make headway, which is why I'm very thankful I had somebody that I knew that could point me in the direction of getting a job, right? I think that it's an old cliche, but getting where you want to go is who you know in a lot of respects, right? So for me, like, the number one advice that I give to any college student is just meet as many people as you can and network, and be able to, when you find yourself looking for your first job or a new job or an internship, you can ask all these industry professionals about potential opportunities, and then develop your pipeline from there, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like the networking side is pretty important. People always bring that up, but I'm pretty sure most of us don't even understand what that entirely means. But before I ask about that, I think I want to get the main question that people always ask you. I'm sure you get it all the time. But what are the main skills that you look for, both the soft and the technical skills, that when you see them, you're like, I want this person?
Yes. So I do get asked that a lot. So to clarify, you are asking in regards to people that would interview at a company that I recruit for like an engineering position? Something like that.
A position like that, yeah.
Okay. So I've worked at a number of different companies, right? They all have varying degrees of what they would consider a great candidate, right? From an engineering perspective, there is nothing more that you could do than work on your fundamentals, whatever they are. So fundamentals meaning if you're a software engineer, you work on your computer science fundamentals, things like algorithms, data structures, language syntax, things like that, right? If you are a recruiter like me, you work on your recruiting skill sets like sourcing and research and data analytics and relationship development, things like that. The more that you could showcase that you have a really, really solid foundation, the more likely you will have success in quite literally every interview that you have. Like, it's just across the board, get really as good as you can. And that means just putting in the work. So that might seem kind of obvious, but it is surprising how many people with just on paper awesome backgrounds that for whatever reason in an interview setting, they're not able to tap those key or core skill sets and just succeed in that element of the interview, if you will. The second one is be very excited for the company that you interview with. So excitement is, you could quantify it in a number of different manners, because I know that like excitement sounds like you have to be like this buoyant like personality, right? Like I gotta be happy, right? That's not what I'm saying. You can articulate your excitement in a number of different ways. For instance, you could do a lot of research and say, oh, right, for instance, I work in cruise automation, which is self-driving cars. You can do a ton of research into the background of this company to showcase your excitement. So things like, oh yeah, I know the CEO. He launched a company that was sold for $1 billion, and then he launched Cruise, and that was sold to General Motors for $1 billion. I've seen your autonomous vehicle efforts in Phoenix and San Francisco. I've read articles, right? I think that in a lot of companies that are mission driven, I would say that that is what I've worked in primarily, is startups which have this like overarching mission. And most of the people, I'm going to say most of the people that work at these companies care deeply about the mission. And if you can show that you also care deeply about their end goal or their purpose for existing, then that's, I mean, provided that you have the fundamentals in place, that's like 9/10 of the battle.
So are you saying that the company fit, you'd say, is more important than the actual skills that you have? I mean, the excitement, yeah, but.
Yeah and no. I would say that the number one thing that you should have is like a skill set that you bring to a table, right? And we're talking specifically about, at least at this point, technical roles, right? So when you are looking for a position that requires a specific skill set, but you could be the most enthusiastic person for a company, but if you don't meet that bar, that technical bar, then it's really all for naught, right? Now, in recruiting, again, when you get out of things that are not like technical jobs, for instance, I might be a technical recruiter, but that means I just recruit for technical positions. It doesn't mean that I have like an engineering skill set, for instance. When I interview recruiting people, like their skill sets are a bit more soft, right? It's like they can talk well, or they can write well, or they can think concisely, right? So what I try to do is assess their problem solving ability through just like what happens when you hit certain roadblocks in recruiting, right? Because those are going to be the people that can work themselves out of a hole generally. And I want those people on the team, right? But like if it's not like 1A and 1B, it's like 1 and a really close number 2 is just have an interest in the company that you interview for. Do your research, and it could push you from like a borderline to a yes, just based on your enthusiasm. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah. Do you think a company can be a good fit then for you, or do you think that you mold yourself to that company?
That's a great question. I think that I'm a firm believer, actually, in people being good fits for companies and company culture rather than vice versa, right? I am also of the firm belief that the company is interviewing you, but you are also interviewing the company, right? I understand that that is somewhat of I guess, depending on the roles that you recruit for, the roles that you're interviewing for, that's somewhat of a privileged stance. I kind of get it, right? Because some people don't have the luxury of interviewing like for multiple jobs, right? Sometimes you get what you get. But in the industry that I'm in, tech, even in some of the roles that are maybe a bit easier to hire for than, say, engineers, it's pretty difficult to find really qualified, really great engineers in general. There are still plenty of opportunities in this domain, right? Which, if you are afforded the opportunity, you should be able to assess this company and their culture, right? Like be able to really hone in on, okay, so what is their work-life balance like, for instance? What is their overarching goal, right? What are the what are the reviews that you could find on a website like Glassdoor, right? What are employees saying about the CEO? What are they saying about the culture? Things like that, right? I worked at Uber, and Uber has had its fair share of press. Let's put it that way. And I can speak to the fact that the culture in portions of the company was pretty toxic. On the recruiting side of things, the culture was pretty great because the people that we hired in embodied the good elements of the cultural values that Uber had. Whereas there were people that they took those values that Uber had in place and they manipulated them for their own like selfish, bad reasons, right? And left. But that's, again, what I'm trying to say is that you do your due diligence and you ask people a bunch of questions, and then ultimately, if you're in a position where you can say no, you should do so, because you don't want to try to shoehorn yourself into a place where you're not a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, other than all of that research that you did and speaking to people, how exactly do you figure out the company that's a good fit for you? Because like you said, in Uber, there were toxic parts, but then there was the great recruiting side of it. So how would you know that?
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic question. I mean, I was there at Uber for a year and a half, and by and large, I had a fantastic experience. And the pockets that had that bad culture, I largely did not intersect with, right? So in that regard, it's kind of tricky, right? You kind of don't know until you join. Especially if you join like a really large company. If it's small, like let's say a startup, it's a lot easier, right? You can, if they want to extend you an offer for a role, you could say contingent on me signing. I want to meet the entire team. I want to stop by for lunch. I want to see how you all work, right? Prior to that, if you're not able to do that, you can schedule time with the hiring manager or who will manage you in the future, or ask during the interview pointed questions about, hey, how is it like working for your boss who will be my boss, right? At 9.5 times out of 10, you will get an honest answer because it's a one-on-one interview and the person is employed there, right? And they will likely, hopefully, give you a positive assessment. But if they aren't, if they're not feeling it, then it will be, in my experience, it will be evident, I guess. But I will say, like, probably 9/10 of the battle is doing your due diligence outside of that setting, getting a decent feel for how people enjoy working holistically there. And then when you're in that environment, ask questions, like just ask a lot of questions and then try to narrow down, and also like trust your gut too. Like if you're asking the manager who is interviewing you and you don't get a good vibe from them, chances are you're probably right. It might not be worth the risk, I guess, or well, depending on the type of role it is. But anyway, I'm monologuing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's great. So if I do my due diligence, I interrogate my interviewer, turn the
Yes.
interviewer out, and I do all of those things. What would still hold me back? What are the main things that you see hold students back? What are the things that you see and you're like, that's a red flag. I'm not going to hire this person.
Oh, I see. Let's see. I think the one thing that comes to mind immediately as a red flag is somebody that does not have good interpersonal communication skills, whether that is through an abrasiveness or an arrogance or an assumption that they have already passed an interview, right, or something along those lines. It is somewhat common in tech, not common. It's uncommon, but not rare. Let's put it that way. To see that in worlds and things of that nature, right? Especially if the person comes from a traditionally good engineering program, if they will, right? So one thing that I love to see in an interview when I'm chatting with, say, a university student for a recruiting position is just humility, right? Just like, hey, I'm really eager to join this company. I really like what's going on here. I hope I've answered your question sufficiently, but if there isn't, I'd love to just learn from this experience. So tell me if there's anything that you would have liked to have heard, right? Or if you're encountered with a question that you don't know the answer to, say you don't know the answer to it. Likely that is not a bad answer. If you try to fake your way through a response, and the subject matter expert can call you on it or notes it in their brain, then that is by far a worse outcome than just saying, I don't know, tell me, maybe we can work through it. Or one thing that I love to see from candidates is people, if they don't know it, don't try to answer it, but instead, maybe give me some data that I can work with to try to formulate an answer out of it, for instance, right? As opposed to just carte blanche, just full stop saying, I don't know. Like, don't give up. Admit that you don't know, but work with it, right? Try to push the question forward. Ask a lot of questions, right? If there is like one bit of advice that I have, like if you are going to fail an interview, it's because you are like, you don't have that intellectual humility and that like that ability to just be in an interview and you know, take the questions as they come and answer honestly. And B, not trying to push forward and answer a question by asking more questions, by like fleshing out the scenario a bit more, right? Yeah, so those are, I mean, regardless of the role that you interview for, that's like, I mean, it's so vital. Don't be a jerk and just realize when you don't know questions and ask more questions to get to a conclusion.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With regards to like your resume, have you seen a resume that is really bad and one that's really good? And how do you characterize those?
Oh yeah, there's a ton. Okay, so yeah, I've seen I find them particularly in engineering because by and large, a lot of the engineers didn't, you know, say major in, you know, English, right? You didn't double major in like writing concisely, but also doing this like very technical thing, right? So understandable, right? But I think the key to a good resume, and there's a lot of ways that you could parse it down. Key to a great resume is just having all of the information easily readable, right? Concise, one page. One page is plenty. Like you could fit all of. You mentioned. Actually, before the conversation, you mentioned Elon Musk to me about cars and stuff. Elon Musk could put his experience on one page of a resume, and I've seen resume designers do it. It's without a doubt. The people think they need like 4 pages to articulate their experience is just bonkers to me. So concise. Every internship that you've done, you can do to like 2 to 3 bullet points. Without a doubt, you could do, this is your core responsibility. This is something that you improved. Here's how I did in the job. Those are basically like the 3 bullet points, like your role-related responsibilities, special projects that you did, and how you performed against goals. That's all you need. Trust me. And if they want to ask more, they will ask more. But you can definitely do that. If you're a university student, education at the top of your resume, very crucial. Otherwise, as a recruiter, I'm going to read that as you are an industry professional. And then when I dig deeper, it's like, oh, this person doesn't have any real experience. They just had internships. I'm more likely to pass on that resume, just in general, right? What else? Okay, one thing too that I love seeing on resumes is character. So like, if you on the bottom, if you have like interests that are fun, share them, please. You're not just your skill sets. You're not just your degree. You are the culmination of your experiences in life up to that point, right? And if you, like for me, I used to be a musician. On every resume that I have, there's like this little line on the bottom that says interests, jazz music, comedy, things like that, right? It's like, oh, this person might be fun to work with, right? But it's not just it's not just being fun, right? It's like the fact that you have other interest areas means that you could bring other potential value to the culture, right? You could introduce new things, and if, in my experience, a diversity of thought and a diversity of just people from all walks of life lead to better outcomes in the groups that you work in. So indicate the stuff that you like doing. What else? What else can I say? If you are a technical person, so an engineer, for instance, list your technical skill sets in order of their strength, basically. Like, what are you most comfortable in working? As an engineer, let's say if you're a software engineer, languages. If Python is your primary language, put that and either put parentheses like almost like a human language, like fluent or strong or something along those lines, where I can look at that and say, oh, great, this team over here is hiring a new grad Python engineer, something like that, right? Lastly, this is a little unconventional, but I find it helpful as a recruiter. Put what you want to do in the future in your resume. So meaning, if you are an engineer, right, and you want to segue into a specialization of engineering, you can say, I'm a software engineer, I want to work on machine learning, or I want to work on big data, or it doesn't necessarily have to be for the role that you're applying to. Like in the future, in my career, I would love to get exposure to distributed systems or deep learning or image processing, computer vision, right? Especially if it aligns with the areas in which we do. So for instance, cruise automation, right? If I see a new grad saying like, oh my goodness, I've had internships in this area, I would love to get work in my internship area, but down the road, 3 years from now, I want to be a machine learning engineer. That's bonus points because that's a core area of what we do in cruise automation. It shows that they have interest areas in the type of work that we do. So that was a lot. I hope everybody got that.
Yeah. Well, I'm very interested in the whole thing about interest because I'm pretty sure every single career counselor I've been to has told me to remove that. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Fair. I mean, I work in a very I guess I work in a domain like tech that is a bit more selective in a lot of areas, right? Like especially in engineering, right? And for us, because we get so many direct applicants to jobs, there are only so many things that you can parse away from a resume to deem whether or not they are worth moving forward. And sometimes that little extra motivation or that extra signal of interest is enough for me to warrant moving forward with somebody that I might not have in the first place. But tech is way more open as opposed to other industries to have that like little interest area. So maybe all of my advice should be taken with the caveat that my experience is firmly in the tech world, right? If you're applying to jobs in finance or, what else? Some type of like marketing or something along those lines that are not at a tech company, you may want to heed the advice of those of your career counselors, right? Because they probably, especially we both have common experience at Columbia. That's a career services center that's geared toward consulting and finance, just like full stop, right? It's like I feel that, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate the advice, but I kind of feel myself going in a different direction, right? How do I structure it to that industry, if you will? And me as a recruiter, I love seeing everything that I mentioned because it means that they want to work in that specific domain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're also speaking about the part where you can include some stuff about what you want to do in the future and things like that. So where do you include that in your resume? Is that a profile kind of thing? And also with that question, I was wondering, how do you view humor in a resume?
Yeah, that's funny. So I'll address the first point. I think that on a resume, I would tuck it in under or above like an interest line. So if you have interest, like, hey, I'm interested in kayaking and horse, I don't know, what you're interested in, right? Below that, you could say, I'm interested in the future tech interests or future career goals, something like that. Machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that I'm not a big fan of in resumes is a profile, like the paragraph that you write. It's like accomplished self-starter, blah blah blah. I don't care. Like that's great, but I want to see what you have done first and foremost, and then once I get through that and I see if you're a fit, below is where you could kind of interject your character or your personality, right? In terms of humor, I think so I can speak personally. I love all attempts at humor, right? Like if somebody gave me a resume and it was just like super interesting or creative or was just, I don't know, had a line about like, it's something sarcastic or witty or funny, I would be, even if I didn't think it was funny, I'd be more inclined to like, oh yeah, this person has like a personality. I'd want to chat with them. That said, I'm not every recruiter, and I would probably suggest playing it safe at a lot of companies. Humor, like a lot of things, humor is subjective, right? And your skill sets are objective. Like you can articulate your skill sets in a way that are easily translatable, regardless of the people that are reading it. Whereas humor, I mean, unless you're the next like Richard Pryor or something, I don't think it's probably the wisest thing to do.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, you've been speaking about the whole side of technical people, and then you have people like university recruiters and stuff like that who are less technical. But I feel like that's coming together a little bit more as time goes by. So, how much do you think it's important to have that kind of computer science background in order to be successful in whatever job you try to do?
Uh, I don't think it's quite at the point where you can say that any type of job is gonna like you're gonna see a net gain in having a computer science background, right? I do think that there are more and more roles where it is very beneficial to have that knowledge, though, right? Um, so, for instance, in recruiting, for instance, right? Like I would have been immensely well served by having a computer science degree. Um, because I feel like a majority of the skill sets that I have were kind of innate, and the stuff that I developed at Columbia, like being able to write concisely and be able to formulate a thesis and an argument, which is basically what you're doing in a message. You're saying like, "Hey, come work for this company. You've got great skill sets. Here's why." Like, okay, that's a thesis statement. You make your argument. You conclude it. Those are things that I don't think I needed to focus on for like a degree, for instance, right? Furthermore, cultural anthropology in of itself is like an amazing study, and I enriched myself, right? And I don't regret a second of it. But moving into technical recruiting, if I'd known that ahead of time, I would have been like, okay, well, maybe I should learn what what a framework is, or a database, or something like that, right? Or what the most common languages are out there, or how to construct an algorithm, right? Things like that, right? I think that it would have been very helpful. What I would coach new grads, or people coming out of university, is seeing where that type of skill set could make an appreciable impact on your job, right? So, meaning, and again, this all circles back to networking, right? So you could jump on the phone with somebody that has this job and request what is called an informational interview. I do these all the time. I jump on the phone because I love helping new grads. I just say, yeah, I'll tell you everything about recruiting. And after chatting with them, I'd be like, oh, cool. Well, hey, in the future, if you're ever looking for a recruiting job, I can, I could either find something here, I can share your resume with my colleagues in the industry, something like that. But within that informational interview, you could ask, hey, I've been thinking about developing a programming skill set to be able to supplement my job in marketing or sales or finance or recruiting. And they could give you a really honest answer about like where that would benefit them in their job. For me, there are things like creating web scrapers to find email addresses easily, right? That requires some type of computer science skill set. That would have been very helpful, or could still be very helpful. I think I choose not to. I'm a little stubborn. But there are other let's say like integrating your applicant tracking system, which is where you keep all of the candidates that are in play at a company, with a sales lead, like a Salesforce, like a CRM. It's like what you store all of your passive leads in. For me, I would have loved a skill set that would have been able to bridge those two, so that way I don't have to like operate between them, right? So anyway, a short answer is I think it's still very, very industry dependent on whether you should think about it. But the best way to determine that is by talking with people in the industry and seeing where there are opportunities for that and if it's worthwhile.
Would you say that if you had gotten some type of, let's say, computer science minor, you'd be more adept at your job?
At this point, no, because I've familiarized myself with technologies and I'm able to talk shop with engineers well enough to do my job very well, right? Early in my career, I think it would have been immensely helpful if I had. But I would also say that maybe a computer science minor is even a bit too much unless you want to apply that skill set. I would say take an intro to Java or intro to Python course, right? Keep your notes, remember what all the components of the program are, right? And then retain that information, study up, right? And then when you have an interview for, say, a recruiting position, you'll knock it out of the park because I don't see that terribly often in tech recruiting interviews. People, even seasoned industry professionals, are still not able to articulate what certain levels of the tech stack are and what they do and why you would choose a certain computer language over another. When in reality, you are talking to people on a day-to-day basis that is their, like, they live and breathe this, right? And if you want to accrue credibility, knowledge of the industry is the best way to do it. Now, I don't think my job would be I mean, I mentioned some projects that I think would be interesting if I had a computer science background, but by and large, like the job that I do is way more personality driven and written text driven than like unique or novel solutions using a programming skill set.
So then, which direction do you think we're moving in? Do you think we're moving in the direction where we value the STEM a lot more, or we're valuing the arts and humanities a lot more?
Oh, well, value. That's an interesting way to couch the question, right? It's like, I think that if you're looking at it from an economic perspective, right? I think that not a majority, I want to backtrack. If you're jobs, like just pure job creation, there are more jobs being created in STEM fields, right? So if you are if you're an apathetic agent in your life and you're like, I can do anything and I'd be happy, right? Choose a STEM background. Like, go get an engineering degree because you'll be a lot, how would I put this? You'll be more likely to be gainfully employed than like somebody that does not have that skill set, just because it's very scarce, right? Now, in terms of like my type of jobs, right? Like the arts and the roles that tend to funnel in people that focus on more of the arts and humanities and things of that nature, right? Like the recruiting jobs or sales, right? I think asterisk, I'm going to put a little asterisk. This is my personal opinion. There will be more automation in the future that will likely cull out a lot of the manual processes in recruiting, right? That, I mean, I guess translates into fewer jobs in this field. However, there will always be a need for people, at least as far as I could see, and then maybe not always, but it's still into the far future, a need for a person to talk to a person, right? That interpersonal dialogue, even with all of the strides, and I mean, I work in bleeding edge technology day to day. None of it will ever, at least in the relative short term, like let's say within the next 20 years, are going to just full on wipe out an entire industry like recruiting. There's always, I mean, the type of like AI, artificial intelligence, right, is very impressive, but it's impressive in a manner that still does not eliminate the need for like a human dialogue, right? And on top of that, like recruiting software is just not that good at parsing skill sets based on resumes. A whole lot of our lives are narrative driven, right? You need to be able to tell the story of your experience, and a recruiter can look at a resume objectively and say, oh, this makes sense. This is how they acquired these skill sets. This is how they moved into this type of job, right? And then they can validate that over the phone. And then this person can say, oh, right, I actually, given this, I never thought about going into this type of field, right? So anyway, by and large, again, I feel like I'm capping everything with like short answer after like a tremendous like Shakespearean monologue. But anyway, Short answer is that, like, if you don't really care about the type of job that you have in the future and you're equally good at something, yeah, I think a STEM background makes a ton of sense, right? But if you don't see yourself going into an engineering field, there is still plenty of work out there for the very foreseeable future that won't be automated, that I think that you will very much like, people will still like gravitate to.
Yeah, that's actually, that makes a lot of sense. I think the one thing that I'm still a little bit having a little bit of a conflict with is whether it makes sense for you to do the STEM. I mean, whether it makes sense for you not to do STEM, even if it does seem like there is more of a demand for some type of quantitative analysis skill. It seems like that's what people want more now.
Sure. I mean, the job market is very large and it necessitates a whole slew of different skill sets, right? Um, I think that if you want to, I mean, again, if you're kind of like an apathetic agent in this and you are looking at your, like if you're looking at your career as a means of just a series of skill sets that you acquire, right? Then, I mean, you are more likely to be hireable if you have some type of technical skill, just full stop, right? But I tend not to look at people's careers and backgrounds as that, I guess, is that check boxy, right? I think that I this might sound a little odd coming from a recruiter that looks for very specific things, right? But I'm still a firm believer of following your passions, right? And if you're really passionate about, like, or if you really don't have an appetite for tech, right? Actually, let's look at it differently, right? You could look at it from an interviewing perspective. So if you are interviewing against somebody that, let's say it's for a recruiting job or a sales job or something, and they have like this technical skill set that can reinforce their ability, and you are bringing nothing else in to the picture, then that person is likely to get hired, right? But if you are foregoing this skill set, you should consider augmenting your current skill sets or amplifying one to shore up that perceived weakness. I wouldn't even call it a weakness depending on the job that you're interviewing for. It's more of like a plus at this point, right? So if this person can like whip up a script to be able to like cull leads, right? Then train yourself up on the latest sales software, right? That you can like get an advanced certification, right? Or get like an internship that will show you some advanced functionality that you might not have gotten in your exposure to this like realm, right? It's not so cut and dry that you should just like choose STEM, especially, I mean, I don't have a particular aptitude for that type of work. But I've still managed to have a tremendous amount of success in it, right? And I don't want people to feel like they have to acquire this thing because the future is just going to weed out everybody that doesn't have it. Because in my experience, that's just not the case. And it will, even like, again, I feel like I come from a somewhat unique vantage point considering I'm working in tech and I'm seeing basically the future being created. And there are so many people that non-technical people that we need in order to pull that off is just astounding. Like, it's just, it blows me away. So do it if you think that the job that you are going to go in, like, first of all, do it if you want to. Like, just do it. Like, don't do it if you don't want to. Like, just don't torture yourself over it. But if you do want to, do it in such a way that will be a force positive in the job that you join, which means talking to people in that market, right? And then, yeah, I mean, and then there's nothing wrong also with learning that skill set and realizing it doesn't bring a net positive to you and then forgetting it, right? Or learning that skill set, going into your job and realizing you like doing that small subset of your skills a lot more than your actual job, and then going into engineering. There's a ton of people I know that have done that as well. So, like, I know that's probably not the most concrete answer you were looking for, but it's like follow what you feel is best based on your skill sets, and then work as hard as you can at those.
So, I mean, sometimes you do have a passion and it's just not in line with, I guess, where the world is going. For like example, you're passionate about music.
Mhm.
I'm assuming. And you want to work at a company like SpaceX,
Mhm.
let's say. How do you relate that passion that you have to SpaceX in a way that's believable to you as a recruiter?
Yeah. So let's see. Let's say I wanted to work at SpaceX. So for me, my music background was what I would consider an entrepreneurial action, right? Because I launched my own career. I kind of was like a one person shop doing it, right? With no, like, there was no safety net. I was like, all right, if I fail, then I fail. And guess what? I failed, but that's a side note. Um, so I would articulate my experience saying, like, I gravitate to entrepreneurial endeavors. My music career is evidence of this. SpaceX is a heck of a lot different than music, but it's in that same vein. It's like we want to create a more cost-effective spaceship, basically, right? And it's like, holy smokes, that's new. That's really exciting, but there's no safety net, right? Like if that falls apart, then that's a whole lot of money and effort down the drain, right? Like so. I think that the way that I would contextualize, like I see myself in that company based on what I've tried in the past, and I want to work with people that think similarly, that are very mission driven or have a goal in mind. So that's how I would articulate that experience. And you could, I mean, honestly, you could find commonalities in all of our shared experiences, and that's frankly a great interviewing tip. I thank you for coaxing that out of me. That was good. But yeah, like finding what your struggles or your ambitions or your your experiences are, and try to find the commonalities in the place that you want to work at. And that I've seen that a ton, and that works as a force positive for sure.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much. I think I can go look at some of the questions that people have now.
Cool. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we have a question over here, which is, how can I differentiate my LinkedIn from my resume? Is it okay that they're the same, or would it be more helpful for recruiters to see something different? And I
Oh,
think what I'd like to add on to that is it okay to link your LinkedIn to your resume as a link when you send it to a company?
okay. So last question first. Yes,
Yes.
that's perfectly fine. I am of the, I basically live on LinkedIn all day, right? So that will be a recruiter's first stop in looking at your, and if they are actively looking for people with your skill set, it'll be their first stop, right? So I am a fan of having a resume that is different than a LinkedIn, simply because LinkedIn is a social media platform and a resume is an articulation. It's like the summary of your skill sets, whereas LinkedIn is social media. It's a way for you to interact with others, right? So I personally don't mind seeing more personality on a LinkedIn page because it's not like an official legal document. You can like there is a whole lot of space there that has you can fill in the blanks with the narrative. And uh, truth be told, if I'm looking for somebody, I'm going to probably skip that narrative first and go straight to like their experience. But then if the experience looks good, I want to circle back and then read through it and say, oh my goodness, this person's amazing. And they have like a bit of personality, right? Whereas I guess the difference for the question asker is that a resume in general is something that you submit to a company and you don't know the audience. Whereas a LinkedIn page is going to sound a little weird, but it's a more true reflection of who you are because it represents you. It's again social media, right? It's for professionals, and you don't want to like, I don't know, turn it into your one act material or something, right? For like a theater production, but you are at the liberty of like showcasing who you are, and thus the people that go and find you are likely to be more aligned. Like the people that are going to be interested in you are going to be more aligned with your character that is on the LinkedIn page. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. Complete sense. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I also just heard you say that sometimes you're looking around on LinkedIn just looking for skills.
Oh yeah. So a big part of my job as a recruiter is finding qualified people. It's what we call passive candidates, people that are not actively interviewing. This might not directly apply to university students yet, but it will once you acquire a skill set and you go out in the world, right? Um, Basically, I mean, I would say most recruiters in tech are on LinkedIn a lot, looking for skill sets and backgrounds and like, yeah, basically just like the ideal candidate, right? Not every ideal candidate is going to apply directly to you, so you have to go find them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I will look at another question. Another question we have is, how much do referrals help?
Oh, referrals are like everything. Yeah, like look, the best thing that a company can do to hire is look at the people that you've already deemed hireable and have them refer people that they think are hireable. It just gives you a very strong signal, right? It's part of the reason why you want to develop an informational or like a network, if you will. You want to chat with as many people as possible. But and not just like here's my business card, have a nice day. Like actually sit down and talk with people because they can vouch for that conversation in one manner. Like internally at Cruise, we have a referral system, and then you can have anything from like I strongly vouch for this person's skill sets, or I cannot vouch for this person's skill sets. They like found me on LinkedIn or something like that, right? But there's gradations, there's levels in between. And if you have a conversation with someone, you articulate your interest to them, and they're like, "Man, I'd love to work for your company someday." You're likely to get a relatively strong referral based on your passion for that domain, right? So anyway, to answer your question, referrals are great. Get as many as possible. Have people refer you into their companies, right? Like it's you are going to be more likely to get an interview as a result of a referral than a direct application. That just full stop.
Wow. So then how do you actually end up meeting these people? How do I find these people to have these coffee chats with?
Yeah. Well, you're chatting. This is a good example, right? You invited me to participate on this panel. I mean, it's not every day that you can like ask, "Hey, you want to do a panel?" Right? It's not like an everyday occurrence, right? But you extended an invitation to chat about something or share a domain expertise, right? If you just change the audience from people out in the world to an audience of one, which is you, right? People will still be inclined to do it because they want to learn more about the industry, like, or they want to share their experiences, what's good, what's bad, how to do it. Because by and large, I mean, frankly, I know how hard it was to find a job after graduating, and I ended up getting an amazing job, but it took like a lot of interviews, right? And interviewing can be a grind and it's tough. So like leveraging, or sorry, looking back on my experience makes me more like it makes me want to help people, right? I really want to find people jobs that they can be really passionate in, right? And for me, I'm more than happy to talk about recruiting to any individual, really. So that means going on LinkedIn, for instance, and like hitting up people. It's like, "Hey, do you have time?" And keep the messages short, but like say, "Hey, do you have like 30 minutes to chat about this? I'd love to learn more about it," right? You can lean on career services. There's alumni referral networks that are like basically built for this. You go and say like, "Hey, I want to learn more about this industry. Who's around?" And you chat with them. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll definitely refer you. You're dope," right? Go to meetups, you know, like if there's a place, like if you go on like meetup.com, I know that's like an old man thing to do, but still, you can go to meetup.com. People have meetups. Like, let's say you want to be a software engineer, you go to a Python meetup. You're like, "Hey, I just want to learn more about what it means to be a software engineer. Who wants to chat?" You go get coffee, right? Like, there's plenty of avenues to do that. And they're all recommended.
Okay, yeah. So now I've done all of that. I've had my great coffee chat. It was amazing. My life will never be the same again. How do I build on from that? How do you go from a coffee chat to actually getting a job? I mean, it sounds a little bit messed up or sinister, but how do you make that transition?
No, I don't think it's sinister at all. I mean, there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking for something that you want, right? So after that coffee chat, you could do it in person, you could do it through an email. You could be like, look, the information that you shared with me during this conversation has really opened my eyes to the industry, and I'd love to get my start in it. If you'd be willing to refer me, I'd love that. If not, I totally understand, but if you could connect me with a recruiter, I'd love to chat with somebody further. And that's basically it, right? Most people, if you show that amount of willingness to do the legwork, will happily do it, unless you left like a really bad impression. But most of the time you're not. I mean, if you have an eagerness, basically it's, I guess the terminology or the parlance that I go to is it's like a hustle or like a grind, right? You want to get your face in front of as many people as possible, especially if you're in like a field that is harder to get a job in, right? Like, I feel like if you're in tech, for instance, a lot of people will come to you. But if you want to go to, say, marketing or advertising or even like consulting to an extent, like even though it's in demand, like it's hard to get into those like top 3 companies like Bain or similar, right? So meeting with people and showing your skill, like again, it's all about that human dialogue. And most of the time, if you have that human connection, you ask a lot of good questions and it seems intriguing, people will be willing to help you. It's like, yeah, we live in a fraught world, but still have faith in humanity enough to like, if you ask for, a way in, that people will give it to you if you show the work, basically.
Awesome. I mean, that's some really great advice. Is there anything that you haven't said today that you really want people to know? Something that you never want to see in your interview again?
No, I think I already covered that. Just basically like if you don't know something, say it, but then like try to work through it. Like treat it like a problem that you have to solve as opposed to a yes/no type of question, right? Aside from that, like anybody that's on the line here can add me on LinkedIn. I'm Scott Bacon, and I work at Cruise Automation. I'm very easy to find. I got the same bald head, so you'll be able to see me. And if anybody wants to chat about recruiting or getting jobs or anything along those lines, don't hesitate. I'm more than happy to help out.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott Bacon, for speaking with us. And thank you to everyone else for tuning in. I had a really great time speaking with you. And if you guys look on your right-hand side, we have some tabs over there. So definitely sign up for Uncubed Entry. I mean, it's the newsletter that goes out every week, jobs tailored just for you, and also HR Uncubed, which is going to be happening soon, later next month. So yeah, thank you so much. And we hope to see you at the next webinar.